Hi, this is Jeff Nyquist, and this is another edition of Friends and Enemies. I'm in the United States. My co-host Alex Benesch is in Germany, and we're going to discuss analysis and synthetic thinking in strategy and espionage, and of course the nature of our thinking and intellectualizing. Because today everybody has these ideologies. They have these different ways of approaching controversial subjects, but people don't really think. They sort of do a rah-rah in which they get behind one set of ideas or another, and it seems to me they don't really think it through. And this makes them very vulnerable to the manipulation of agents of influence, especially from Russia, but also from China. And of course, China has that. Let's make a deal. We're gonna ship you cheap things, and you can make a lot of money if you go into business with China. And they've got their hooks into Wall Street and to the banks. And the Russians, of course, have their gas pipelines into Europe they'd like to run, and exporting oil and raw materials. And of course, there's a thirsty Japan and a thirsty Europe, and well, there's Trump all in the middle of it. So, Alex, you wanted to talk about analytic thinking and intelligence analysis. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about spy cases, when we talk about what's behind things and what's even behind that, we're kind of used to it because it's, we've discussed the sheer volume of known intelligence services and known cases, and it's like it takes years to get a grip on, this era, this intelligence service, and a variety of missions. And then there's a new archive that's been opened or found, and then people go over that, and you see all these new cases. But then, if you get a new archive, right, you can't just trust it. I mean, it may have been sanitized, there may have been things put in there, and so you may get the wrong picture from, let's say, a new archive, right? Or there's a digital file, from the Stasi, East German intelligence service, and so now we have a digital database of assets and operations and all that. But there's like this sheer volume of it, and when you go through volumes, like a volume of that size, certain things start to repeat, but you also get surprised. I mean, you see gradual changes the way intelligence is done, or operations of influence are done. And when we break down a case, an individual case, we try to communicate the basics, right? We just give the people the essentials, and so they save time, and that's part of the service that we provide. We save people time. They can make better decisions. They improve their thinking. But it's still, there's a difference in volume, the kind of volume that we went through. And it becomes like riding a bike, thinking like a spy, thinking like an intelligence officer, thinking like an analyst. And so what's natural for us, or feels natural for us, took a lot of time and effort and training, right? There was no magic shortcut. There was no, magic formula where you can determine what's accurate or not. And so what communism is trying to prevent, agents of influence are trying to prevent, is analytical thinking, right? Because it's so hard to go against analytical thinking, especially when you need force, physical violence, and people see, okay, what Russia is really about, or they use intimidation, which works to a degree, but even Russia knows that it's more elegant if you play the mind game. So it's like this insane push to further infantile thinking versus analytical thinking. So when I break it down in very short way, and I see this now, the infantile mind has goals, of course, and it's mostly seeking joy, status, control, and avoiding effort and pain. This is kind of what the goals are for an infantile person. And how do they try to attain these goals, they seek shortcuts, ideas of magic powers, attachment to authority, attachment to a group, being loyal to a group, using the strength of a group, and they're very egocentric and it's very emotional. Now, the analytical person, the analytical mind also has goals, and I think the main goal when it comes to, let's say, an analytical job, profession, the main goal, I think, is seeking accuracy. Now, people use the term truth a lot because it sounds so heavy, right? But I tend to use the word accuracy more because sometimes with complex cases, you don't get 100% or over a span of years. You don't necessarily get an accuracy of 100%. But you can try to improve your accuracy. So this is kind of what we're going for. And the analytical mind is also seeking improvement for others, meaning security, wealth, control, etc. And the analytical mind is willing to accept effort, endurance, pain to reach the goals, right? So how to attain the goals: work, effort, sacrifice, collaboration, responsibility over long, long periods of time, and managing risks. The analytical mind is more group-oriented in a productive way. It's more analytical and not emotional. So, of course, ideology's propaganda is geared towards the infantile crowd, or it's infantilizing people further. It's promising goals, promising joy through magic and shortcuts, or leaders, cult techniques. And leaders are like the idealized adults, and followers behave more like children. So this is why I've been saying for a long, long time, Putin is not your daddy. He's kind of playing the father, right? I mean, he's kind of like wants to be the father figure, and people are willingly placing themselves in the role of a child, right? Just accepting that authority, accepting that Putin knows it all and Putin has the plan, and they're following that. And when we look at what the shrinks are saying about the infantile mind, of course they've been looking at the extreme versions of that. There's always an extreme version of everything, and they kind of break it down into categories. Like, how do people process certain things? How do they deal with certain things? And they talk about fear, passivity, over-adaptation, uncertain identity, inner agitation and strain, offensiveness, anger, defiance, impatience, grandiosity, narcissism, depreciation, unstable relationships, depressive mood, addiction, suicide fantasies, and self-damaging. So this is kind of like what the shrinks are saying. And there's an overlap between the shrinks and the intelligence world, because you want to know how to read people, understand people, and also how to eliminate any bias you might have, because that can screw with your accuracy. So let's. I want to get your opinion on these different categories. So let's start with fear, right? Now, children, of course, little children, they have irrational fears. I think people are familiar with, the monsters under the bed, the just nightmares for no reason, and just like this general sense of the world is a dangerous place and I really need protection, and kids need help to deal with fear, how to process fear, how to understand, okay, this is a relevant fear that I need to get a grasp on, and there's irrational fears. I don't need to fear the monster under the bed because it doesn't exist. So how do the Russians, for example, and they have the shrinks to teach them how to do it, how do the Russians play on fear? And who's especially vulnerable to a mismanaging of somebody's own fear?
Well, of course, fear is a basic tool. The communists have this in common with the ancient Chinese philosopher named Han Feitzu. Han Feitzu was the philosophical founder of the legalist school in China. and he believed that the ideal uh, monarchy or the ideal empire is one where the imperial service controls people through fear and physical punishment. Fear of physical punishment. He's kind of an early behaviorist, right? You know, the KGB had Pavlov and his dogs. Remember? They'd starve the dogs, and then when they'd bring the food, they'd ring a bell. And so then they got to the point where all they had to do was ring the bell and the dogs would salivate. So it's stimulus and response. You create a stimulus and you invoke a response in the animal, and it's very physical, right? Han Feitsu was very physicalist. Han Feitsu was a materialist. So when Mao comes along and the communists come along in China, they go and they say, look at Han Feitsu. They like Sun Tzu, but Han Feitsu becomes important for Marxism-Leninism because Han Feitsu is a materialist, really. It's all about the body. People are their bodies. And of course, fear is about the body because fear is, what are you going to do to me? Are you going to hurt me? Are you going to kill me? Right? That's what fear is. Imagine if we were all ghosts and you couldn't touch me. You couldn't kill me. You couldn't hurt me. Why would I be afraid?
Hmm.
What would I be afraid of? Right? Fear is rooted in the body, and control of people through punishment is what the kind of fear that these totalitarian regimes. That's why they use torture, they use physical punishment, they use imprisonment in a labor camp, and why the labor camp system in China, for example, the Lao Gai, is also a brainwashing camp. It's a re-education through labor camp. The Soviet camps had that early on, but they pretty much dispensed with it, I think, later on, although I think they probably still have elements of that. Not the same as the Chinese. But I should quote something from Marx, from the early Marx, that kind of gives you the mentality here. In 1845, toward a critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, Marx wrote, "The task of history, once the world beyond truth, that's religion, had disappeared, is to establish the truth of this world. The immediate task of philosophy, which is at the service of history, once the saintly form of human self-alienation, which he calls religion and the church, has been unmasked, is to unmask self-alienation in its unholy forms." That's that's the revolution. That's violence. Thus, the criticism of heaven turns into the criticism of the earth, the criticism of religion into the criticism of right, and the criticism of theology into the criticism of politics. And
Yeah.
that's materialism. That's how you get to the body. Deny God, deny the spiritual world. You're just a body. Now I'm going to use fear to control you.
Yeah, but they still stole everything from religion, right? I mean, Marx, when you quote Marx like this, it's like you just erase the supernatural out of your package of ideas. There's no more supernatural things, at least on the surface. But there's still a concept of hell, I believe, with Marx and the other communist authors, because for the communism, what is hell? What is the worst possible state to be in as
The
humans,
gulag.
right?
Hell is the gulag. See,
No,
Joseph, yeah.
no, but I mean, like when they project the capitalist imperialist future, it's like this endless cycle of misery, and it's getting worse, and it's like cannibalism to them, and it's like everybody's always going to be suffer. So it's like this eternal circle of hell. This is kind of what communists have been working on. So this is kind of they didn't want people to believe in a religious type of hell, so they gave people a real world image concept of hell, which is the capitalist imperialist future, right? This endless cycle of misery, because this kind of like what people used to think of hell, this eternal place of punishment where it's just ongoing. And then also stealing from religion is like the other concept. What's the best possible state for people to live in? For Marx, it was not like a religious type of heaven type paradise. It was like an earthly paradise. So this is kind of how the communists try to manage fear in people's heads, saying, okay, this is the future you get with the other groups. You're going to end up in hell, but you follow us, and this is how you can manage your fear, because we're going to create paradise here on earth, right? It's like he's stealing from religion, but he's not admitting that.
Well, Stalin did this when Stalin created the Soviet Union, or created it with Lenin. Lenin really started, but Stalin made it work. And if you go to Kotkin's Volume 1 of Stalin's biography, he said that Stalin was the only one who knew how to make a Marxist state work. Well, how did he do it? Stalin had something none of the other Marxists had. He had training as a seminarian. Stalin, when he was young, he was training to be a priest. So what Stalin did is he recognized, wait a minute, this abortion thing, this free love thing that the communists brought in right after the Bolshevik Revolution, it doesn't work. So he said, no, we don't want abortion because we'll have no babies. And we need babies because we need soldiers for the revolution. And so they didn't make abortion illegal in the Soviet Union until around 1934, but they were discouraging it. And of course, the Soviet system was collapsing the economy, so women didn't want to have babies because they couldn't feed them. And they were demanding abortions because they were terrified of having a baby they couldn't feed. And this was the reality. So they had the NEP so that people could feed the babies. So they went back to capitalism. But what Stalin did is he structured the Soviet Union in a way after the Orthodox Christianity. So he had the Soviet family, which if you look at it, it's the Orthodox family, only you're using Marxist terms to describe the Orthodox family.
Yeah.
And then Stalin was the little father. He became like a czar, right? And Marxism he spoke when he would give talks. Stalin would use the same kind of cadence and the same kind of language that a priest would use, which resonated with the Russian people in a way. And so then when Lenin died in January 1924, they put Stalin in a mausoleum, which he's in there today. It's 101 years later, and he's still there, and he looks like he just died. He's preserved. Well, what is that? Well, in traditional orthodoxy, Christian orthodoxy, a saint, an Orthodox saint, when they die, their bodies don't decompose. You've heard these stories. They'll go in 20 years after some saint has died. They'll dig them up, and they're as fresh as when they were buried. Their body doesn't rot, right? This is the story out of Orthodox Christianity. So they are imitating orthodoxy. See, he's taking Marxism and he's going, in order to make this work, I have to copy the Orthodox system of the czars. And what's really interesting is in Osvensky's biography, his father used to play pool. Osvensky, I think is his name. He used to play pool with Stalin. And he got very upset with Stalin. This is back in the early 20s. Because Stalin, while he was playing pool with him, would say, the Russian people are a czarist people.
Yeah.
It's like, and this is not what an Orthodox communist is supposed to think. But see, this is where Stalin could think outside the box and adapt. And so if you think about it, the Marxist paradise is like the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. And of course, what is the gulag? It's the hell that you go to when you do not accept the truth of Marxism-Leninism.
And so I think
you can see how they did that. Stalin did that. He made a structure that actually could endure.
So in communism, if you eliminate the idea of God, the idea of Satan, then everything is left to us. We either.
Well, you have to be God.
We either have to. God, we either do the job of God, or we do the job of the devil, and this is kind of the choice they presented to people. And whenever when it's a certain topic, let's say the Ukraine war, or there's no freedom in Russia, and they're just killing people or just punishing people for speaking out mildly, or there's an AIDS epidemic in Russia, or their health system is shot, and things are falling apart. But still, you see the Russian propaganda in the West just denying this baseline reality that happens in Russia, and people want to believe the lie, I think, because of fear. Because when I explain something real about present day, actual, real life Russia, I say, okay, this is like X amount of people have AIDS in Russia. There's like, the statistics, and there's some, human trafficking. There's a huge issue with human trafficking. And it's like a psychopathic system, and the way they run their prisons, like the standard prisons, is insane. When I say these things, certain people, they do not want to process this information because of fear. Because if what I say is true, or if what other people are saying, what they've studied, is true, then there's this overwhelming sense of fear, because it's like Russia is their last hope to save everything, right? To save the world, to save America, save Europe, save us from the what I call the windmills of Zion, these conspiracy ideas that have been created by governments. And like this, it's fear-based. There's a lot of fear. And I mean, you can see that even with some of the hardest Trump followers, when you say something real about Trump and you humanize him, you say he's a human, he's things are what they are. It is what it is, and people don't want to believe it because they have this overarching fear. It's like a lot of fear, and they have to combat this fear by just denying reality. Or they think that when I admit to something that's bad about my side, well, let's say the Republican Party or whatever, when I admit something, it's actually true that I know to be true. When I admit something, I'm helping the other side, and I have this overwhelming fear that the other side is going to win. And I think this is why in conservative circles, some of them, there's no mechanism to correct things. There's no mechanism to increase the accuracy of what you're thinking and what you're concluding, right? So fear can motivate you to do something. It's a huge motivator. But it's so baseline, people don't know what to do, and oftentimes they do the wrong thing. That's kind of like the fear management, and I've seen a lot of very fearful persons, and it's like some of these fears may be rooted in reality, but some of these fears are more like irrational. Right? I mean, you heard the same stuff over and over again, right? It's like always, America is the great Satan. America is starting every war. America supposedly started the Ukraine war, and they want World War III. I've heard that for, I don't know, 20 years or 30 years. They want war.
I've heard it for half a century.
They want to torch the planet. They want to torch the planet because they're so irrational and whatever. And it's like, you got to live. And these people that listen to this, they have to live with this fear, as if powerful people want to just torch everything. I mean, some of them do. But I mean, elites have learned over time. There's some people are not stable enough to be in leading positions, of course. But it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like this overwhelming sense of fear, and people usually don't want to admit to fear. But it's important to talk about how we process fear.
There's one other weird thing. Joseph Schumpeter, who wrote Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy, which is a good general book to understand communism, because I think he understood the Stalin system. Unlike many of his contemporaries, the original version of the book, I think it was 1937 or 38, then he was reissued after the end of World War II with an addendum, a new part talking about Stalin and his system and how Schumpeter thought it would inevitably overtake the world. Schumpeter was very pessimistic. But Schumpeter he said, look, you've destroyed aristocracy. in the Western world, and you've destroyed the class that defends you. The bourgeoisie doesn't defend. Their thing is greed and making money, and you can't fight communism with economic motivation. Homo economicus can't
Mm.
resist communism. And his critique of Christianity was rather shocking in that he said, look, Christianity is a hedonistic doctrine. If you accept Christ, you go to heaven and you have something
Mm.
enjoyable. If you're not, you burn in hell forever. So he said, that's again pleasure and pain, right? And
Mm.
fear of going to hell. Um, and I think that this is a very primitive way of looking at Christianity, because I don't think that's true spirituality. True spirituality is not really concerned with pleasure or pain, because it's something deeper. But this is the way a lot of people are in a materialistic age. When Christianity becomes materialistic, and you see how Stalin and the communists use it, you see how very primitive manipulators of people in the religious sphere will use the threat of, the manipulation of pleasure and pain. Um, and then where is the depth? Where is the real spirituality? And that's the problem with the moral idiocy we see around us. That's so shocking, because people who claim to be spiritual are actually just very materialistic and hedonistic.
Mm.
and
Very
it's
baseline,
and
yeah.
their form of Christianity is consistent with materialism. And this is what Jacob Burckhardt was saying in his work, and it was later published as Force and Freedom. Jacob Burckhardt said, look, there's three elements to civilization. There's the church, the state, and the culture. And the culture is hedonistic. I mean, it's all the good things that we get. The culture also has art and spiritual values, but the core of it is this producing things for us. Our culture is a lot about things, not entirely. And he said the state is there to defend us. The church is there to spiritualize us. But the problem is that with the destruction of the aristocracy, which is the class that defends, and then everything going to business, everything being like in America, he said, about big business, about making things, we suddenly become materialistic, and then the church becomes the Jesus business. And the
Mm.
state is all about supporting the economy, which is what we see in America and Europe today. It's all about consumption. But wait a minute. No, that man is not a homo economicus, right? Somebody very famous said, man does not live by bread alone. Remember that?
Yeah.
Um, and so,
I mean, yeah, I mean, like, it's like a good example maybe is like America is a country that they love cars, just like the Germans do, right? So we love our cars. Americans love their cars. Other populations love their cars. I mean, some don't actually. I mean, the French, they kind of make a thing out of it, or a lot of French people still do. They don't like a shiny new car. You know, if it's shiny to them and brand new, it seems like, I don't know, oppressive to them or fascist to them. So they want to ding it up a little and scratch it up a little, and they don't like to, cuddle it. They don't like to polish it and love this thing. It's more like a sense of honor to them if your car is dinged up, and it's just an object to you, right? So not everybody is the same. But when you see really nice cars, I mean the higher end cars or the really high end cars, I mean, who usually affords these cars? It's people above 50 for the most part. And I mean, I see this a lot in my country, when people put so much love and effort into this car, but they don't put that much effort into their body, even though we know what's looming. We know where the real fear is. I mean, is what's the biggest fear? Your car gets a scratch, or something isn't 100% right with your car, or is the real fear about stroke, diabetes, and heart problems, and just cancer, right? It's like we have a weird sense of managing fears. I mean, this was when in the pandemic, right, when we saw all these Russian propagandists, I mean, every single one that was already known as a Russian propagandist, they all started to talk about COVID, and there were all these new guys that became influencers, they were all pro-Russian, all talked about COVID, and they made such a big deal, about the COVID vaccine, even though it was fast-tracked, especially by the Trump administration, the project, what was it, Warp Speed. You had all these American companies. It was like a huge undertaking, so a lot of eyeballs on it. But they were obsessing about this fear, the fear about this vaccine. And you saw all these pro-Russian activists leading very unhealthy lives, smoking cigarettes constantly, eating wrong, just not doing sports, not really taking care of themselves. And it's like, okay, so you're managing your well-being through food and smoking and alcohol. This is how you manage, especially alcohol, you manage your fears. But the real fear should be about your current physical state and what's this going to be like in 10, 20 years. You're not seeing the real threat, and you're not seeing this huge biological weapons project of the Russians and the Chinese. You're just seeing a COVID vaccine. I mean, I did so much work on biological weapons during the pandemic, telling people there's this whole bigger thing over here that you're not looking at. It's like what India is freaking out about with what the Chinese were doing, and the Russians. We know the Russian program. There's like this whole big threat. This is real fear. This is real, right? There's exercises about, American exercises about a smallpox pandemic, even considering super smallpox, which has been built a long time ago. This is the real fear.
The Russians made a smallpox weapon.
Yeah, the super smallpox. It's like this is the real fear, and this is a rational fear. This is a realistic fear. Your safety, your children's safety, your friends and family safety. That's a real fear, right? But the propaganda didn't make it about that. It made it about just the COVID vaccine.
Well, the fear is a real thing, and you got to understand that the totalitarian movements, National Socialism and Communism, which are fearful in what they do, the thing about these movements is that the people who head them, we often call them psychopaths or evil people. What is their nature? Why are they using fear? Why is it so basic? And also using envy and hatred, all negative emotions, claiming that they love humanity. They'll say, "Oh, I'm so filled with love. I met this Mexican communist years ago, worked with the Cubans, and he was all talking about love, but he was running guns, and he was really all about hate. He hated Americans. Oh, his rage against Americans was just phenomenal. He said he would drink in Mexico with the DGI guys, and they were just great. And that one day Americans would wake up and they'd all be massacred by biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons. And he just looked forward to that day. Of course, it was like 34 years ago that I met this guy, and of course, when I met him, he went and put a loaded gun down on the middle of the table, and of course I was there with a friend of mine who was a pretty tough guy. I don't think I would have gone into the room with the guy by myself, but he was pretty crazy, and of course, being a Marxist, being a communist, involved in the criminal trafficking. And there was just in the news, they caught a Mexican with 180,000 rounds of ammunition sneaking into the U.S. And it's about these gangs that are going to unleash violence here in the U.S. against us, against our military bases, perhaps. But it's important to understand where are these people coming from with all their negative emotions. You talk about fear. This is what's motivating them. It's something deeper. It's an angst. And both Jacques Bourzoon, the literary critic, and Eric Voegelin had a common take on it, that it was alienation. And here's what Bourzoon wrote in his essay on the Marxist intellectual. He said, "It is important to understand that the feeling of alienation of the communist intellectual is not derived from open advocacy of world conquest and consequent and the consequent total society. It is precisely his main ideological and psychological motivation for joining the Marxist movement that society should finally be united without distinctions and joyous. And the reason for the coercive methods and the fear and the reversion to violence is that the Marxist intellectual, and the same thing with the National Socialist intellectual, is that as far as their intellectuality, is their alienation. And this is what, to dovetail with this alienation concept, in Eric Verglin's autobiographical reflection, there's a great synopsis. He tries to explain where are these crazy intellectuals with their insane ideas coming from, and he says that his hatred of National Socialism and also communism and other ideologies, his feeling is a primitive one. He says, "I have an aversion to killing people for the fun of it,"
Okay.
and this is where causing fear and violence, there's fun in it. And he said, "What the fun is, I did not quite understand at the time when he was younger, but in the intervening years, the ample exploration of revolutionary consciousness has cast some light on this matter. The fun consists in gaining a pseudo identity through asserting one's power, optimally by killing somebody, a pseudo identity that serves as a substitute for the human self that has been lost." That's alienation, when you've lost yourself. You're alienated from yourself, you're alienated from God. And he says some of these problems I touched upon in my study on the eclipse of reality, published in 1970. A good example of the type of self that has to kill other people in order to regain, in an ersatz form, what it has lost is the famous Saint Just, right? This is the revolutionary who liked executing people in the French Revolution, who says that Brutus either has to kill other people or kill himself. The matter has been explored by Albert Camus in Albert Camus' book, The Rebel, which I recommend, highly recommend, because Camus explores the revolutionary, the violent revolutionary psychosis. And the murderous equanimity of the intellectuals who have lost their self and try to regain it by becoming pimps for this or that murderous totalitarian power. And Verglen ends by saying, "I call them murderous swine." And of course, what Barzoon, if you go to these different really deep writers who analyze this, this is what they come to. These people are deeply alienated, which is by the way, psychiatrists in the 19th century were called alienists. They
Hmm.
were mainly, the madman is the person who's alienated.
Yeah.
And so they're madmen. But it in the 19th century, it had a moral dimension because they were alienated from God. They were rebelling from God's order, trying to say, "I want to be God. I don't like your order. I want to make my own order." Excuse me. And this is fundamental to Marx. And it's fundamental to Hitler. Look, at Hitler's going to be the German Messiah. What is the 1,000-year Reich? The 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth? What is that? Again, you're copying structures from Christianity, from the Christian world, and you are building a totalitarian world in a kind of ersatz form, right? You're creating a fake structure where now you are Jesus Christ or you are God. This is what Dugin is doing, trying with his esotericism. He's trying to
Hmm.
herd all the religions into one religion that will then be devoted to Russia and the universal rule of Moscow and Beijing.
Yeah, and when you're
Think
not
about that.
when you're not in a state of fear, right? When, let's say, Western society, pick any Western country in the Cold War, right? I mean, it's like the communists, the communists, they spread this fear, right? It's all gonna, go to hell in the West, like cannibalism. This is the future of capitalism and imperialism. But then this doesn't happen, right? The prophecy doesn't come to pass. The prophecy that Marx and others had done. I mean, he styled himself like a prophet, but looking into the future. But so people saw it's not happening. It's not what they claimed it would be. So you're able to live in physical safety, relatively spoken. You can maybe someday own a house, you can own a car and a fridge, and you have a safe supply of food, or a reasonably safe supply of food. So like the basic, so the basic fear may be not there in the West, but when the fear is not acute, there is depression, and which is also a feature of that's lumped into this set of categories for an infantile mindset, or a heavily infantile mindset. Now, depression can hit many people for various reasons, and it's like I've seen a lot of people falling for Russian propaganda and falling for the Russian agenda, and these people that fell for it, I always thought had a problem with depression. They're very unhappy, and I think they managed this depression not with pharmaceutical medication, but I think they managed it with this Russian propaganda, right? They felt this glimmer of hope. They felt this sense of things can be better. Things can be one day how I want them to be. I can get what I want. I can get the kind of society I want to live in. I can have the status I want in that society. Have this Orthodox Christian, have an Orthodox Christian family, and just that's kind of like it's like an antidepressant drug for them. This is how they manage themselves. This is how they medicate themselves. And if you watch some programs, you watch Tucker Carlson, you watch Alex Jones, you watch all these kind of people, it's like therapy in a bad way for the audience, right? It's an audience that's depressed to a degree, and this is kind of their therapy session. It's like you go to therapy once a week or several times a week because it's the internet, it's open 24/7. And here you get these people offering you that hope, offering you that apparent medicine. But like with most types of medicine, you get hooked on it. There's you build up a dependency, you build up a tolerance to it. So what really helped you emotionally a year ago may not be helping you now. You need something stronger, right? Just sharing stuff on the web, Russian talking points on the web isn't really doing it for you anymore. Now you gotta get some contacts, right? You have to meet people who are more radical, more into this, and then you get the sensation again, I believe. You really you really get that sense of therapy again. And I think that it's not even about really the content when you watch certain shows. It's not about the content, it's about the effect that it has. And they will say anything to get the desired effect.
Well, there is this concept in the soul of order and disorder, and it goes into people's notions of God and the self. Order flows from God. God created the natural order. And there is within each person this concept of this order inside the self. We know deep down what is right and wrong. And the problem with the modern revolutionary is that he is enraged. He has become alienated from himself. Verglen cites the dialogue of a suicide with his soul, and how the modern world, when it goes crazy, people either have something in them that orders them or they don't. And this goes back to David. He wrote the very, very famous study on inner directed and outer directed persons. So he's a Harvard sociologist, psychologist. And what was happening is that people, before the advent of modern mass media, were inner directed. That is, they had a sense of order from within. They had a connection to God and the self, and they they could order their lives. But these messages, first starting with the use of radio, and then television, and the part of the end of the study was um, about how television, the areas in New York, television was coming, and they were finding more of this other directed meaning from mass media, getting your images from the TV, and it was advertising. This is what's cool. I saw it on TV. This is the product I want. And so they were getting their sense of self from that rather from being interdirected. And this was very frightening. I'm trying to think of the study. I'll think of it in a minute um, because I've got it here in my collection. And it really is an impressive work. Back in, I think it was written in 1949 or 50. Um, but in a sense, the other directed person is one step towards alienation because their inner resources are gone. And of course, that kind of person, when you're using fear to control someone, that's other direction. I'm the other, I'm directing you, I'm using fear. I'm threatening you with going to the gulag. I'm threatening to take away your privileges, like in China with what do they call it? They evaluate people on how good they are in the view of the Communist Party. And so this categorization of order and disorder is related to this alienation. And of course, the creation of an ersatz form or ersatz order, right? And this is the big problem. Today, we have so much disorder. And that's a concern I have with the left because it's obviously the leftist concepts of order and woke and an open border and mixing people from different civilizations together in one country and thinking it's going to be a wonderful, mosaic. It's really not order. They're creating disorder, the leftist policies in the countries of Europe, in the United States. Oh, the communists just love this because then that you get closer to
Yeah,
the
and also,
revolution.
even if we look at, let's say, fantasy cinema, right? Because that's kind of like the most financially valuable cinema. If you look at, the top box office grossing movies, it's Star Wars, it's Avatar, Harry Potter movies, and you look at the people that made this, right? I mean, J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, is a leftist. The new Star Wars movies are very much to the left, but even the old movies were. I mean, George Lucas was very clear on that on multiple occasions. I mean, he said that communists did inspire him when it came to the rebels who fight the empire. So Star Wars was always left. And you look at Avatar, the Avatar movies by James Cameron. I mean, James Cameron is very much to the left. So, and what do we see in this fantasy cinema? We see a main character that is alienated. He's a nobody. He wants to fight the grand battles and distinguish himself and be part of a group and experience the magic and success. But the character is a nobody, and the character is really depressed. I mean, Harry Potter is depressed. He lives in a very miserable situation before he goes to the magic school. Luke Skywalker is kind of like he's bored, he's frustrated. He's living on this miserable planet, and I think he works in agriculture, if I remember correctly. I mean, I've seen these movies like a bunch of times, but he's doing these runs with this airplane spaceship thing, and he's supposed to water the crops or just fertilize the crops or something. So it's depressed. He's kind of depressed. He wants out of the situation, and the main character in Avatar, he's a quadriplegic soldier. He's a veteran who can't move his legs, very depressed. But then he gets into this magic world and he becomes this hero because he's in contact with this group that lives a completely different way of life. So this is like, I think, the alienation that you just talked about, and we see that in leftist Hollywood cinema. the fantasy cinema. And it's like people think it's better to be a gun blazing hero and join some crazy cause. Better that than to be depressed and just to go on in life and go on in life. I mean, we talked about the Unabomber, right? This Kaczynski guy had a very high IQ. I think he went to some very elite university. I think it was Harvard, and like over 150 IQ. He works a couple of years. He's very depressed. He takes his money and buys this little dinky hut, I think in Montana, and he starts to make these package bombs that he sends over the mail. And it's like when people found, in a weird sense, in a very negative sense, they found inspiration in that guy because he put out that manifesto about technology ruining everything, an industrialized society ruining everything. We need to go back to nature and live a very primitive life because otherwise we'll be depressed. Not constant fear, but just depressed, miserable, no way out, on and on and on and on. Have to follow all these rules, blah 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 blah. So this is like the way Russian or communist propaganda tries to manage depression. They want to use it. They need it. They need these miserable people. And they surely won't make these people happy in the future when the communists have control. But they're offering sort of this seeming way out of depression. And it's like fantasy cinema is therapy. Alex Jones is therapy to people. Tucker Carlson is therapy to people. It's a therapy session. I think that's what it is. People lay down on the couch and just let this guy talk. You're still muted?
The book I was talking about is A Lonely Crowd. And of course it's David Reisman, Nathan Glacier, and it's Rule Denny. But anyway, this book, it's very, very old, but it's kind of a classic. Now they're sort of left of center academics. They say the other directed person is about work. And I'm sorry, the inner directed person is about work and production. The other directed person is about consumption. The inner directed person is building their character. The other directed person is trying to adjust to everybody around them, trying to fit in. So one is about character, the other one is about belonging. It's a fascinating study. There's valuable things in there to think about. But of course, I think that people like Barzun and Eric Berglund have done a more comprehensive job of understanding disorder, anxiety, alienation, and the problem of the revolutionary. The thing is that but what's fascinating is that these left of center social scientists are watching how the bourgeoisie and late capitalism, the capitalism of 1950, was producing a society that was shifting from being about working hard and building your character and just sitting back and consuming and getting other people to like you, which is where we've become. And so that we have the society that elected Truman and Eisenhower, and now we have the society that elected Donald Trump. We have a society that elected a reality TV star, with the alternate being to elect this communist woman who's maybe drinks too much, Harris, former Vice President Harris, who's all messed up and has all these woke ideas that she's then trying to hide and claim that she's further to the right than she is. The whole thing is so messed up, and it's all about these images they're projecting. None of it's about, we had a president for 4 years, Biden, who was not even mentally capable of functioning as president. Everybody ended up admitting it. He would walk off stage the wrong way and fall down. He supposedly, would lose his way in a room. No, the door is that way. This is a guy who's supposedly running the United States of America. And now we've got a guy there who clearly we can see that Trump, no matter, all these people idolize him, he doesn't really know very much. I mean, look at the tariffs. Look at his policy towards Ukraine. Look at everything he's doing. He's like Mr. Magoo. I think that he wants to be able to direct things, but always, even though he wants to get out of NATO and he wants
Does
to
he
sink
seem
Ukraine.
depressed? Does he seem depressed to you? Because I mean, he created this persona, right? It's like I mean, he's appeared on WWE wrestling, and he even in his other business ventures, he created this persona that mean jokes, and he made all the right jokes against Hillary Clinton in the debate and created some slightly iconic moments there. So he tries to create this image of I'm happy, I'm doing fine, I'm a billionaire, I'm great.
Well, remember they say he's a narcissist.
He
And
seems
so
depressed to me.
the thing about, well, yeah, because narcissists are depressed, and they're alternately depressed and angry, because depression and anger are just two sides of the same coin. If you go to Jean Twenge's work, Generation Me, she analyzes what the wave of narcissism means, because as we're moving to this other directed mentality, we're becoming narcissistic. She did a study, and of course, I think Trump is arguably narcissistic. People have noticed it in him. She definitely, she's a psychologist from San Diego State University, or sorry, the University of San Diego. She correlates narcissism with depression, and she does this by she uses testing data that could reveal, it wasn't, these tests weren't made to reveal narcissism, but you can analyze them for narcissism. So she looked at psychological testing data for people born around 1900, my grandparents' generation.
Mm-hmm.
And she found that only 2%, less than 2%, suffered a major depression during their life. Less than 2% of the people born in 1900, that generation. And of course, they ranked very low on narcissism when she looked at all the psychological testing of that generation. Then she looked at people born after 1964. Now, most of those people are still alive, right? So she's looking at data, and she was writing, 15 years ago, whenever it was her book came out, Generation Me. So she looked at that data, and she said she found out that 25% of people born after 1964 had suffered a major depression.
Wow.
From 2% of the American population to 25%. And then, of course, they tested very high in narcissism. And she said, look, the rise in narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic
traits and
problems,
patterns,
it goes it goes along with depression. So that and her idea was, this is very controversial, she really makes the case that it's feminism, it's mom going to work. See, it used to be that the family was on a farm and mom and dad were always there, and the kids always had their parents. Then all of a sudden you have dad has to go to a job. Mom is a stay-at-home mom with the kids. But then with feminism, mom needs to go get work because, mom is missing out. Missing out on work. And so mom goes out, and then you've got the latchkey kids. And Jean Twenge points to testing data from the American schools in the early 1970s, I'm going from memory, showing that the kids were starting to be depressed. Why? Because mom is not at home. Mom doesn't love me anymore. I come home, I've got the latchkey, I let myself in. There's nobody there. Mom doesn't love me. And so the kid is depressed. So the schools tried to fill the gap. And this is part of what Twenge says in the book. The schools tried to fill the gap with self-esteem education. Oh, the problem is mom went away and the children lost self-esteem, so we're going to pump them at school full of self-esteem. Well, that was a mistake, says Twenge, because what you're doing is you're telling the child they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, even though the child hasn't done anything good.
Yeah.
And that encourages narcissism, because a narcissist is a person who has a false self, a false sense of self-esteem.
Yeah, I can do anything.
From the love of the parents, right?
I can do anything. I'm awesome just because.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, it's like that's an interesting correlation and causation. I mean, basically, when that link between depression and narcissism. I mean, of course, people now call everything narcissism these days, but there's like the full blown disorder, and this is like super heavy, super pronounced. And I mean, you read up on some of these cases, or maybe you've experienced some of these extreme cases. It's something. I mean, there's always an extreme version of these things. Okay.
Well, narcissism is something. I mean, I was encountering it as an employer, as a person in the world in the 1990s, and I started reading up on it then, and I started realizing this is a very big part of what we're dealing with, because Karl Marx was a narcissist, malignant narcissist / maybe a psychopath. So there's theories that psychopathy is on a spectrum with narcissism. Of course, what you're doing is you're talking about evil. The old language was alienation from the self and from God, right? Alienation from true order and true goodness. So there's this moral dimension. Sam Vaknin, who is maybe he's maybe the most interesting scientific writer about narcissism, and Vaknin is a self-declared atheist and a materialist. He actually breaks down at one point in his videos, and I read his book. Is fascinating.
Malignant self-love.
Because it really is it's a voyage into evil, because he's so exact. He is himself a malignant narcissist, diagnosed, and going into it, and he described such a darkness and such an evil when he does this. But even Sam Vaknin said, well, maybe it's just evil, right? Maybe it's just evil in the end. I mean, he actually has a video where he just breaks down and says this.
Yeah. I think it's like something that rubs off it very, very much. I mean, there's other actual disorders that don't rub off on other people, so to say. I mean, there are studies that say it does to a degree. I mean, if you live, let's say your parent is schizophrenic, or has some form of psychosis, or is emotionally unstable. Sometimes this can rub off, but I think the strongest rubbing off effect, I think, is with narcissism, because at some point you're running into a normalcy bias. People think that's normal. Because you see ruthless people being successful or seeming successful. You see good people being miserable. You experience people treating you badly for no good reason, and people being extremely, extremely selfish, and not factoring in the consequences of that. So people kind of adopt a sick way of thinking, and they more and more think that it's normal. Right? And when it comes to propaganda, when it comes to this, especially communism, we get into this category that shrinks talk about, where they call it identity disturbance. When somebody asks himself, who am I really? I mean, what am I? Am I just my job, my regular job, my regular home?
This feeling of emptiness, and which accompanies the cluster B personality disorders, and they are identity disorders. It used to be in the psychological manuals that homosexuality was an identity disorder, right? You're a man, but you're attracted to men, or a woman attracted to women, and that's an identity disorder, because your true identity as a man is to be attracted to women, right? And so a narcissism is, people don't realize that it's an identity disorder. And a lot of, all of these things involve the problem of identity. With borderline personality, it's the empty self. It's like, you have to fill me up. I'm empty. I'm desperate.
Everybody else is responsible for my emotions. Yeah, the good and the bad.
I hate you. So. Don't leave me. Right. This is the borderline.
Or you make me feel so elated, and I'm like high now because you made me feel that way. And the next moment is, you made me feel terrible. You're responsible for my feelings.
Right. You're responsible for exactly. You have to regulate my feelings. And So this is these identity disorders. If you look at Marxism and all the people that gravitate to these extreme ideologies, they are these. A lot of them are these cluster B people. There is, of course, the book Political Ponerology, written by the Polish
Lobachevsky.
psychologist. Yes, yeah. Have you read that book?
Yes, I have the German version, the English version. I think I
The
even
German
have
version.
a Spanish version of it.
It's a problematic book. I mean, he's kind of a materialist in his approach. This group of psychologists in Poland, to give the background, when they first encountered the Marxist-Leninist regime in Poland after World War II ended, they had to go to classes where they were being oriented to the new regime. They were university psychologists. I forget what university they were at. Do you remember?
Excuse me, what?
Um, what university? Where was it, at Warsaw, or was it at another one?
I don't remember, but
Were they at
from the
Krakow?
very first second when that change happened, they were analyzing the heck out of it. It was like, oh, okay, I can understand
Right,
this and
yeah.
that.
Well, they had this orientation by this Marxist official, Marxist-Leninist, communist official, and they all kind of started saying to each other, "Does this guy have? Is this guy a psychopath?" And they said, "Yeah, I think he's a psychopath." Just interacting with him, and then they started looking at other representatives of the regime and started saying, "These people are psychologically abnormal." The people that the regime chooses, elevates to direct things, it's like a criminal psychology, but it's also the pathological, sick personalities. Or, well, Vergland says it's pneumopathology. It's spiritual sickness, not real mental illness, spiritual sickness. But this is a controversy between people who believe in God and people who don't. But it's so political ponerology means the study of evil,
A
right? It's
science creating an
political
actual
evil.
science of evil, because there hasn't been one, which is like the most surprising thing ever, because it's been such a huge problem. And what this guy did in Poland in secrecy, I mean, he burned like the first draft, and he gave the
Well,
second draft.
they were a group of them, and they
Yeah,
worked for 20 years on this manuscript. And the secret police would steal it, they would reconstruct
yeah,
it, but finally they tried to smuggle it out through an Italian, and I think the secret police must have got it because it never popped up.
yeah.
So when the last surviving, the youngest psychologist of the group, because the others died or whatever happened to them, he got away to America and he worked as a janitor, I think is what he said. As working that, he had to, from memory, to reconstruct the text. So that's what political ponerology is, political evil. And he's looking at it from this point of view of these psychologists who studied these regimes. So it goes the National Socialist regime, the Soviet regime, and Mao Zedong. You read this really great biography of Mao that was put together by, I think it was an American and a Chinese person, that shows that Mao was, I mean, he was a psychopath and very evil. But this political ponerology kind of breaks it down, and these are the traits. These are the types of abnormal personalities that these regimes promote and that originate the ideologies of these regimes. And it's really very scary because it is a zoo of scary, deformed, psychologically deformed and sick individuals that you are looking at.
Right. And so what Lobachevsky did was he actually combined different things from different fields of science and just kind of come up with this hybrid, some unified theory of evil, which is like an interesting concept, right? Because people should have done this a long time ago, and invite other specialists from other fields to just to work on it. I mean, when it comes to identity, I mean, I think many people have problems with their own identity because, and this is used by communist ideology, because what was the pitch for such a long time? I mean, it's like what, over 100 years of actual government style communism, right? I mean, what was always the pitch to ensnare people in the West? They say you don't get to have a real identity or a good identity in the West that you feel comfortable with. You're just a number to the corporations and to the governments. You're just supposed to create this tax revenue and buy products, make somebody else profits, go to work, and then just, drink your booze and watch television and go to bed. So you don't get to have a real identity. Now, of course, communism was then in direct competition to, let's say, a traditional sense of identity. I'm an American, I'm for the Constitution and liberty and the American way of life and patriotism and kind of looking at the whole thing. So this was kind of the great competition that communism experienced. But it's like, okay, so they promise more, right? They say, we have a better identity for you, or you can be part of this new thing, and that's your identity. And whenever I see activists, followers of communist propaganda or current Russian propaganda, there always seem to be an identity crisis. I mean, I've seen this a lot. I mean, they have tried different things oftentimes. I mean, they have shopped around in the supermarket of ideologies, and they dabbled in this and they dabbled in that. They try to build their own identity. And as you said earlier in the show, in the past, you were expected to have a sense of identity when you were an adult, like 18 or 21, right? You were supposed to have an understanding of your strengths and weaknesses and your characteristics and how you would interact with other people. You were supposed to have already connections to people, your family and extended family, and make friendships at last, real friendships. And then when you're an adult, you were expected to form new relationships, professional relationships, personal relationships. And to do that, you were expected to have an identity and understand the identity of others. But now it's like people are wandering around shopping in this crazy supermarket of ideologies until they find something that they think they can build an identity with, but it's all borrowed. It's all like a mass product. I mean, if I see another conspiracy guy, if I see another conspiracy guy pretending to be an expert on intelligence and being like in the know, being a special type of human, being on a special mission, it's a mass product. It's just borrowed. It was created for the masses. It's just another category for you to pick. So you surf on the internet and you dabble in this, you dabble in that. I mean, some people have different anonymous profiles on the internet. They give themselves a nickname, and they're dabbling in the extreme right, the conspiracy stuff. They're dabbling in something or the other, and they haven't yet decided where they ultimately will go. So it's like almost like a multi.
Well, and the thing is, part of it is they believe every conspiracy theory that ever comes along, and the problem is, and this is exploited by the Russians and the totalitarians. The Nazis used conspiracy theory to lure people in. It was typical for Nazis to believe in this Jewish Masonic world conspiracy. The communists used it and exploited it. I mean, the idea that capitalism is a great big conspiracy to pauperize everybody. It's ridiculous. Capitalism brought the greatest prosperity the world has ever seen. But the alienation, these alienated people who are, Nietzsche would say there were ill-constituted men, people who weren't put together right. They were made badly, or they came out badly, perhaps because of the way modern society itself has evolved. And what Jacques Barzun said, this is what he said about the Marxist, the Western Marxist hates capitalism, but then a lot of them, they look at the Soviet Union and say, oh, they didn't do it right. It isn't right. And so they become, this is why I think that Moscow had to ultimately try to do its collapse, because it wasn't just that they needed to fool the Western right wing. They needed to get the left in Western Europe, get their own communists to see that they weren't so bad. They weren't a failure. And I think they ended up now, they're really interested in controlling the right, like the AfD in Germany and MAGA in the United States, where you've got communists joining MAGA, and I think they're joining the AfD too in Germany. I think you'll find there's a big infiltration there. Is that is an instrument they find is crazier and easier to use than the old left, because what Barzun said is, he said the deep alienation of the Western Marxist. He's a person who sought the universal end of alienation. Of course, Marxism is the wrong path to escaping from alienation. He becomes doubly alienated from the bourgeois society in which he lives and from the Soviet state, which obstinately refused to conform to his ideal. This is very frustrating. This alienation, says Barzun, is in this alienation, the process of reaching it and becoming conscious of it takes various forms. I mean, literally, these people are nuts when you listen to them. The postmodernism and the Frankfurt School and all this. It's like, no, you're going in the wrong direction. You're going over a cliff.
Yeah.
You don't have true order. You don't have a conception of true order. You are disordered.
Yeah.
You're sick.
And it's like there's no threshold almost for entering such a group, like a Russian front group or something that the Russians have infiltrated, whether it be the mystical right wing or just the flat old Nazi right wing or just an American.
Notice they're all going for a world that doesn't exist, that can't exist. They're trying to create something that's impossible.
Yeah, and it's like normally when we talk about groups that mattered in history, groups that had an effect or a positive effect, and they achieved something. These groups had a selection process, because selecting who to work with is one of the most essential things that you can imagine. And so when you look at these groups that the Russians have infiltrated, there's basically no threshold. There's no quality control. There's no real selection process other than do you share the stuff that we're saying? Will you do what we want you to do? Okay, you're in. You're part of the group. I mean, over time they make more demands. If you want to get status in the new group, like a mystical MAGA Dugin type group or whatever, if you want more status. Because at first they welcome you. It's like this love bombing in a cult. Like, oh, now you found your brothers. Now you found hope. Now you found the rebellion. Now you're part of the adventure. So they love bomb you at first, and you don't want to lose that. But then when you get into a group over time, they will withdraw some of that love, and they will make demands. So now you have to alienate yourself from family, former friends, people that think differently. And you have to make some sacrifices for the group, or you have to do something stupid for the group to alienate yourself even further from regular society. So they kind of make more and more demands. But ultimately, for most of these groups out there that can be created in 5 minutes, or just another group, there's no real threshold. There's no real selection process. And that's diametrically opposed to what a real, actual, capable intelligence and an intelligence organization would do, because the selection process of let's say an almost idealized intelligence service, that selection process is tough, right? I mean, they don't want the schizos, they don't want the narcissistic people, they don't want people with an identity crisis, they don't want depressed people, and this is like when they would narrow down the first tough selection to the next level of selection, until they end up with people they're fairly certain can become great field agents, intelligence officers, analysts, somebody who can be of use. And I mean, the literature. I mean, sometimes the selection process was super tough. Sometimes people got through regardless of their deficiencies. Because they knew some people, or a mole got them in, a mole that was already in the organization. But usually, when you want to build or expand an intelligence organization, you have to be extremely picky. And because if you have an analyst with any of these problems, I mean, his accuracy is going to be shot. He's not going to give you an accurate picture.
The problem is, look, you've got people who are... Marxism, Leninism is instrumentalist. Lenin was an instrumentalist. That is what I mean. He's Machiavellian. The end justifies the means. We're going to do anything it takes to create a kind of heaven on earth. The problem is, what you do is you create a hell on earth when you do that. And so the Marxist becomes disillusioned with his Marxism, and he goes and he defects to the West, and then he becomes disillusioned with capitalism, and so he's disillusioned with everything. What he is he's a spoiled child who thinks the world's supposed to be perfect. Thomas Sowell wrote a great book on the intellectuals today, the prevailing intelligentsia here in the West, in the United States, and he says they've got this childish desire to have this beautiful world that they imagine that they're smart enough with their brain power they can make this perfect world. And the problem is they think that the world and mankind is perfectible, but they're not. And then he quotes Thucydides, the famous historian. He was an Athenian aristocrat general who wrote the history of the Peloponnesian Wars. And what Thucydides said is, he said, look, human beings are problematic. They're bad. They do bad things. They're not perfectible. And the world and history and human beings are tragic. So Sowell said, look, there's two visions. There's this vision that we're going to have this perfect world, and get out of the way. You're ruining everything because I know how to make it perfect. And then there's the reality that this crazy revolutionary himself is not perfect. He can't make
Mm.
anything. He can't realize anything. The world's imperfect. It's problematic. It's tragic. And so this is the tragic vision, Sowell points out. And this tragic vision, you have to adjust and accept the fact this is the world we live in. This is what we are given to cope with, the tragedy of our existence. As Eric Voegelin calls it, the in between, the spiritual and the physical. We all die. Nobody leaves the world alive. We're gonna conquer death. We're gonna conquer the stars. No, that's Elon Musk. I'm gonna put my intelligence in a machine. I'm gonna have parts of a machine put in me. I'm gonna live forever. I'm gonna become a cyborg. It's sick. It's ridiculous. No, that's not.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And if you analyze, let's say, a new head of state in Russia or some other place, or a new administration or a new group, or suddenly there's a WikiLeaks, or suddenly there's Edward Snowden, or something that creates attention, right? That's headline news, right? And people have a certain expectation of what that means. And so when an analytical mind is looking at this new person or group or event, right? An analytical person, they will run through all the scenarios. Okay, this could be completely phony. This could be partially phony. This could be bad. This could have this could go totally off the rails. What are the downsides? What are the risks? Da 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 da. I mean, people spend more effort analyzing the next car they're gonna buy, but they're not doing this due diligence when it comes to things that matter, right? Do you want to join this revolution? You want to join this cause? You want to vote for this guy, or you want to shill for some foreign head of state or some foreign regime? What are the downsides? I mean, I dissected some of these books in Germany that became, well, best-selling books. I mean, in the top-selling category, which was outright Russian propaganda. I mean, not beating around the bush, really. It was Russian propaganda from A to Z. So every single book was structured the same way. They will spend 90% or 95% of the book just trashing the West, what's bad, what's not working, the economy, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, well, the solution to this problem is Russia, or vote AfD, or vote whatever. Like, this is the whole structure. And it's like, what's missing here? I mean, first of all, where is the analysis, a critical analysis of the thing that you're recommending as a solution? Where's your breakdown of the AfD? Where's your breakdown of Russia? What's bad about them? What are the problems here? And they will not even really talk about it. They will just give some little disclaimers, maybe. Oh, well, it's not perfect, blah, 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 blah. Or they will just make these excuses, like these almost narcissistic defenses, or very simple patterns, right? like the Russians always did, especially the Soviet, diplomats or government officials, when somebody snuck in a critical question, when they would visit the West, it's a public event, somebody sneaks in a critical question, why is this going on in the Soviet Union? Why is that going on in the Soviet Union? These Soviet officials would always answer in the same way. They would not address the criticism, really. They would not try to defend what's really going on in the Soviet Union. They will say, oh, but, look at what the Americans are doing. Or this is just, a try to blame us for something that really the West is doing. So it's just like deflecting, counterattack. It's always the same. It's always the same thing. It's like, where is the analysis here, the critical analysis of the stuff you promote as a solution? There's no critical analysis at all. So I'm supposed to buy the cat in the bag. I mean, I'm just supposed to, walk into these woods with a flashlight with dying batteries. You want me to go through these woods by myself in promise of some great things, right? And this is like, but people will accept that because of these elements that we just mentioned, the depression, the fear, the therapeutical effect of believing that crap, alienation, identity problems. These are all the real reasons why people disregard, basic critical analysis of what's being offered as a solution.
Well, it's because they're big babies and they want what they want and they want it now, or they want this utopia, and they're mad that people have gotten in their way. Barzun wrote this. This is The Intellectual as Marxist again. It's just a wonderful piece of writing. The Marxist mentality is thus a utopian mentality in search of the extra-historical, that it's impossible to realize in history, and extra-human, it's not human, perfection. In the last 40 years, the Marxists has been led to believe that this perfection has materialized. The end of philosophy, as Marx announced, the reign of liberty, justice, and truth in the Soviet Union first, then putting his ideological gears in reverse in the West. Disappointed in his search, he has become a non-Stalinist Marxist, a socialist libertarian according to Guerin, reserving his vacant loyalty to Mao, to Khrushchev, to Tito, or to a new popular front, or to a nihilist, or a religious man. And this is where Dugin and the Marxists really have said, all right, Dugin, go for the pagans. You got the pagan revival movement in Europe. Go for the alienated Catholics. Go for the Muslim Sufis, the alienated Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists. Go for them all. Make your super religion. See if that works. See if we can get a hook in people with that. Because we're not getting people to believe in the Marxism anymore, so that the Chinese communists actually go, well, let's use greater Han nationalism. Let's align with the triads, which they did a long time ago. The triads coming out of Taoism and that philosophy, yin and yang. The dark womb, which is the ultimate. It's the mother of us all. The kind of be the flexible branch, not of the tree that doesn't break, that bends with the wind. Be the valley, not the mountain that wears down. The mountain feeds the valley. Be the valley, be the feminine, be more feminine. You see this in the Chinese. Why were they conquered by the West? The West was very masculine. It imposed itself on China. The Chinese are always, it's all about subtlety. It's all about bending. It's all about pretending. It's all about deception. And the Russians have that too. Mother Russia, right? It's a woman. It's not a man. And it's like the East can't quite get its act together in this regard. And so the West now is dysfunctional because they've attacked masculinity and because the West, I think, is inherently more masculine than the East in terms of the political personality of the West. But it's all, I call it the race to the bottom. We're all screwed up. All the leaders are spiritually and intellectually dysfunctional. And this is why the world is going into this bad cycle, this tailspin. You could say the whole world is going into it. Trump is the manifestation in America, Putin in Russia, Xi Jinping in China. There's an intellectual deficit, but there's also this moral idiocy on the part of all these people. And you see it through all. I mean, where is their moral stature when the president of France, Macron, who is so awful in many ways, is the one that's stepping up and at least acting in a moral way, saying we're going to put our nuclear umbrella over Europe if the Americans withdraw it. I mean, kudos to him, but it's like, you're really kind of a fraud, Macron, right? This isn't going to work. Um, why can't they get it together? It's because they're so disordered from within, and they have lost their connection to God. I mean, because it's got to be a real connection. It can't be, oh, I read the Bible and I have the idea. The Bible's an ideology, or this is all no. It's not an ideology. It's a spiritual reality. It's a real relationship with God. It's a real spirituality. They don't seem to have it, and this is the disconnect with the leaders. There's lots of people who do, but the society, no, we don't want to. We don't want that. We want this this perfection thing.
Yeah,
And this is why we're getting the revolutionaries and the National Socialists and the really crazy ideologists.
Yeah, I think especially the Dugian types, what they're going for really hard is that sense of many people in the West, they think there's no loyalty that they experience from other people, right? It's like this when you talk about record numbers of narcissistic behavior, and it's like one of the things that you often hear on social media is, well, nobody cares about you. This is kind of the reality you live in. You're just a number to the government or a corporation, or you're just to other people. You either fulfill their desires, their ambitions, or you're not worth anything to them. And it's like there's an actual problem with loyalty, but when people don't experience that loyalty, or they don't show it themselves, but they want it from others, but they don't really show it themselves because it's too much hassle, too much work, it creates this feeling that you're all alone, right? There's no, alienation within families, alienation in other aspects of society. So you feel like you're all alone. Like you have nobody. Like nobody cares. I mean, if a car runs you over, nobody really cares. The world just goes on without you. And I think this is what they're really going for. And what they're seemingly offering is the promise of this promise of loyalty. Even though I can't find loyalty in Russia. I mean, I don't see it anywhere. I mean, if I looked in all aspects of that regime, there is no real loyalty other than the forced loyalty to the leadership, the mafia rules. Everybody has dirt on everybody. Everybody can get, I mean, in a certain sector of society, anybody could get anybody else killed if they break specific rules, right? They can get to anybody. They can get to anybody's families. And so this is kind of the only loyalty over there that they truly will show. I mean, there's some loyalty among regular folks, but it's like when communism became a real thing, they made a point in keeping people really poor subsistence level because it takes resources to be loyal. It takes time, effort, your own personal resources to help others when they need help, and they need time and resources to help you back and stick up for you. But when you remove wealth, when you remove freedoms, when you remove power from the people, it's hard to be loyal, right? I mean, loyalty could get you killed. I mean, that's what they did in China when they had these quotas. We have to denounce like 2 out of 1,000 people. It ultimately was like more like 6 out of 1,000 people. Declare them enemies, the kulaks, the whatever, and then just publicly humiliate them, force them to make confessions, and then publicly kill them. And everybody else is supposed to watch. And then they had further rounds of political cleansing and intimidation. And that's when they really destroyed, I think, loyalty in China, because even people who had a sense of loyalty were really willing to show loyalty. They thought loyalty will get me and my family absolutely killed. If I give something to somebody else, I will starve. If I will defy the government in any way to help anybody else, somebody will betray me, or the other person that I'm helping will betray me. Right? It's like it takes, I don't know, how many generations do you think does it take to rebuild trust and loyalty in a society? I mean, it's like when you come out of war after war, civil war, blah, blah, blah. I mean, look at the Germans, right? I mean, people think of, well, the Germans. Well, you get the Bavarians, you get the other, you get this group and that group and that group. And they used to fight each other. I mean, there was this fake historian guy on the Joe Rogan program recently who claimed that Hitler grew up in Germany. No, he did not. He grew up in Austria. And then this person would have probably said, well, it's kind of the same thing. Austria and Germany are the same. No, they're not. They went to war quite a few times. And it's like, how do you build loyalty? How do you build trust coming out of this, right? And I think this is when it all broke down in the 1930s. In the 1930s, this is when, this is when they created the fake loyalty to the leader, the cult leader. But we know how much they were backstabbing. The leaders were backstabbing each other, trying to get the other guy's job and to badmouth somebody to Hitler so he would lose loyalty to that guy so you can take his job. And it's like, how do you, it takes, I don't know, probably generations to recreate loyalty. And there's no shortcut. There's no Putin that does it for you. There's no Russian regime, no communist ideology, whatever, that will create this sense of loyalty, because it takes so much time and work and effort and personal sacrifice.
Anyway, we've been going 2 hours now. I think we have to end. And this has been Friends and Enemies. I'm Jeff Nyquist in the United States. My co-host has been Alex Benesch. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you'll be with us next week.